Looking to sound like you know what's going on in the world? Pop culture, social strategy, comedy, and other funny stuff? Well, join the club and settle in for The Jeff Dwoskin Show. It's not the podcast we deserve, but the podcast we all need, with your host, Jeff Dwoskin.
All right, Ted. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. You get the show going each and every week, and this week was no exception. Welcome, everybody, to Live from Detroit, The Jeff Dwoskin Show. As always, I am your host, Jeff Dwoskin. Great to have you on board for another amazing week of podcast goodness. I was expecting you. You know who else I was expecting? My guest this week, Fred Grandy. That's right, he came aboard because I was expecting him. Gopher from the Love Boat. Oh my goodness, yes. We had such a great time talking about his time on the Love Boat, the cool things he did before, including his time on Maude, the Mary Tyler Moore Show, Death Race 2000, the Roger Corman Classic, his TV show Monster Squad. We also talk about when he was a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from Iowa. And, of course, we talk about some of the amazing stage work that he's done, including his current one-man show, Give 'Em Hell, Harry. This episode has it all. So, yes, if you were looking to meet someone and fall in love by the end of this episode, you've come to the right place. My conversation with Fred Grandy is coming up in just a few minutes. A few awesome changes to the show. Just wanted to point out real quick. You might notice an ad at the beginning of the episode and some pop up during it. These are sponsors and advertisers that help me keep the costs down and allow me to keep bringing you the show week after week, free of charge. Everything's free to all of you, and I appreciate the time you spend, and I want to be able to keep doing this week after week. The other great news I have, by the end of the year, you'll see extra episodes popping up. I'm always talking about Crossing the Streams, the live show I do weekly at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be doing best of episodes and showcasing great shows you should be watching in podcast form. Those will show up on the same podcast feed as Live from Detroit, The Jeff Dwoskin Show. It will be part of this podcast family, so you'll be able to automatically enjoy it if you like, subscribe, or follow the podcast. So thank you very much in advance, and I hope you love that, and I can't wait to hear the feedback when they start to show up in your feed. I got so much great feedback from last week's episode with Mike Reese. If you haven't checked that out, check that out. Mike Reese was one of the original writers for The Simpsons, and he was also showrunner during some of its amazing early seasons with Al Jean. Al Jean was also a guest on the show. Search both those up. If you love The Simpsons, then you'll love Live from Detroit, The Jeff Dwoskin Show that brings you the best of Simpson interviews. Also, after you listen to the interview with Fred Grandy, go search up my interview with Ted Lange, Isaac from the Love Boat. Jeff, you had Isaac and Gopher on your podcast? Yes, I did. It's a dream come true. My conversation with Ted is equally awesome as the one that you're about to listen to that I have with Fred. Two amazing people that I am so proud are now part of the Live from Detroit Jeff Dwoskin Show archives of interview goodness. And now it's time for the social media tip. All right. I love this part of the show. This is where I share a little bit of my social media knowledge with you. You know, from the hashtag Roundup tweets I read at the end of the show from my hashtag Roundup account. I love social media. Been involved with social media for so long. And I like to just to share quickly during the show a little bit of my social media knowledge with you. Things I pick up on the street, little 411, if you will. Today's tip is more for you Zoom users out there looking to sound great. My friend Fred passed this along to me. There's sort of a hidden feature in Zoom called Original Sound that will make you sound way better on your Zoom calls. When the Zoom interface is up, when you're waiting to be brought into a call or you're on the call, on the bottom there's that microphone button and you click the little up arrow next to it. And then you can click on Audio Settings and then do the following. Uncheck Automatically Adjust Microphone Volume, and then scroll down a little bit more, and you'll see a section called Music and Professional Audio. Check Show in Meeting option to enable original sound. Then also check High Fidelity Music Mode. Make sure Echo Cancellation is checked. and check stereo audio. Once you do all that, then when you're in the actual Zoom interface in the upper left, you'll see something that says original sound off. All you have to do is click on it to toggle it to on, and it will automatically start making your sound way better on your Zoom calls. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's totally awesome. And that's a social media tip. I'm so excited for you to hear my conversation with Fred Grandy. We talk about his role on Maude as Adrienne Barbeau's boyfriend, being on Welcome Back, Kotter with George Carlin, what it was like having Ethel Merman as his mom on Love Boat, working with his daughter, and working with his son on the Mindy Project. And of course, we dive a little bit into politics as I remind Fred of some of the bills he sponsored. So many amazing stories, but I do want to thank everyone in advance for their support of the sponsors. When you support the sponsors, you're supporting us here at Live from Detroit, the Jeff DeWaskin Show, and I can't thank you enough. I do also want to call to your attention, if you're living in Southern California, Fred's Wax Museum, it's a legendary monster exhibit. If you love wax, if you love monsters, Fred's Wax Museum is a place for you. Frankenstein, Dracula, the werewolf, all the scary monsters from your childhood can be found at Fred's Wax Museum in Wax. Open 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. weekdays, 10 a.m. to midnight, spooky midnight every weekend. If you love wax and you love monsters, head on over to Fred's Wax Museum. All right, well, thanks again. I appreciate you embracing the sponsors. It means the world to me. And I think without further ado, I would love to share my conversation with you that I had with the amazing Fred Grandy. All right, everyone, I'm so excited to introduce you to my next guest. He served as a congressman. He had his own radio show, starred in the Mindy Project, Maude, numerous stage plays. But if you're like me, he'll always have a special place in your heart as Gopher from the Love Boat. Come aboard, Fred Grandy. We're expecting you. I didn't really know how to sing it. Anyway, welcome to the show, Fred.
Well, thank you. Nice to be here. Nice to be remembered. Nice to be anywhere at this age, actually.
I know. I think in my head, everything is captured the way I watched it originally on TV. I think most people are in denial.
I know. I sometimes I feel like I'm a mastodon, like preserved in a glacier somewhere, because most people that I don't know remember that moment in time. Gopher, and I was on the show for 8 years. So listen, I'm not complaining. I live in the house that Gopher built, so it has not been a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up watching you on the Love Boat, and I want to talk all about it because I'm sure there's a lot to talk about. But
so you grew up, right? Well, that makes one of us. Okay.
I know everyone can't see it, but you do. You look great. So you look like you're just
Thank you.
Snapshot in time. One of the nice things about being able to do an interview like this is I get to go kind of deeper and look into a lot of things. So I'm really fascinated at one point to talk about when you switched to politics, because that was one of the things as a kid I remember, like Gopher left the Love Boat and he went into politics. I had no idea what that even meant. And then
I'm not sure I do now, but anyway.
One of the things that I learned was that, you went to Harvard.
I did.
And you were in an improv group in Harvard.
Yes, a very famous improv group, as it turns out. The Proposition, which started not in Harvard Square, but in Inman Square, which is one subway stop away. We began in the back of an Indian bakery. So that show caught on in the Cambridge area. And I began my career there, as did Jane Curtin, Josh Mostel,
oh, wow.
Zero's son, Paul Kreppel, a couple of other people that went on to have careers. And then we moved off Broadway and stayed there, 4 or 5 years. And a lot of people came in and out of that show. And it's still, I think, maybe the best training for people who want to do comedy. It's not the only training, Jeff. I mean, a lot of people think, well, if I'm an improv, I can do everything. That's not true. But it is a great fundamental, not just for being in show business, but for being in politics too.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Quick on your feet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've done hundreds and hundreds of town meetings in little cities all over Iowa. And had I not been in the proposition, I probably would have crashed and burned.
I've only done stand-up comedy for many, many years. I never specifically did improv. I sort of got a feel while being on stage to kind of just go with it. I wouldn't call it improv, but...
No, but it's very much the same thing. I mean, I did stand-up comedy for 8 years as a member of Congress, so... You think I'm kidding, don't you?
I don't actually, but it's still hilarious. It's so funny. It's so funny.
People ask me why I left Congress and went back to showbiz, and I said I got tired of working with amateurs.
You were too good for them, Brad.
Well, I would never say that to them because, they'd cut off my Social Security. And I'm being rather serious now. Some of the worst acting I've ever seen in my life was on the floor of Congress. Interestingly enough, when I was just a kid getting out of school and I'd finished the proposition and I was married when I was in college. So when it came time to graduate, like a lot of people who are misguided at that age, I thought, well, it's time to put aside childish things and get a real job. I mean, I've had a wonderful time being in this improv group, but that's a college thing. I can't do that for a career. So I did what a lot of people did. I applied to law schools. You have to take the law boards, And I had law board scores that weren't even a good bowling score, Jeff. I mean, I applied everywhere. I got into one law school, which was the Salmon P. Chase Law School on the third floor of the YMCA in Cincinnati. And I decided not to matriculate there. But I went down to Washington and became a congressional aide for a guy whose seat I eventually won. But at the time, I remember sitting up in the gallery because I was just a lowly staffer, a gopher, if you will, watching members of Congress hold forth. And I thought, my God, this is the worst acting I've ever seen. I can do better than that. So I left and went into summer stock in Vermont.
Everyone has their own inspiration.
Yeah. Well, mine was to get out of town.
So when you made the foray into acting,
yeah,
you were in Love American Style, an episode of that, but then you were on Maude for like an entire season.
Well, that's how I began. And I'll give you a little backstory with that. After the proposition, my first big break in New York was a 2-character comedy drama with an actor you may have heard of named James Woods. Jimmy Woods and I did this play called Green Julia. And this is, of course, long before either one of us got into any kind of a political life. And he was a big deal. I mean, he was an up-and-coming young star. So we did this play, and I got some nice notices in that play. And it came to the attention of Norman Lear and his casting director, who was a woman named Jane Murray. And they were looking for somebody to play Adrienne Barbeau's boyfriend. So she came to New York, she saw the show, and she said, we would like to fly you out to California to screen test for this role. And I'm like 22 or something like that. I mean, it's all brand new to me. And I think the thing that saved me here was my naivete. If I'd had a chance to think about this and really process it, I would have been scared. I would have probably wet my pants and not even gone. But I went out there, I tested, and they gave me the job. And the next thing I know, I was on the series for, 7 or 8 episodes that year. And that got me out to California. And then I went back to New York and back to California. But that really is what began. That's how I got on Maude. And that's really what moved me to California.
Well, that's an amazing first foray. I mean, just to be around that level of talent right out the gate.
Oh yeah, he's a brilliant actor. I don't know if he does that anymore now. It seems like he's too busy on Twitter, but we got along very well.
I'm not sure. Is he back on Twitter? I don't even know if he is. But I was specifically
he's in the same trash can with Trump, I guess. I don't know. There must be a hit list somewhere.
I met on Maude, though, is what I met with B. Arthur and Bill Macy.
Oh, no, that was a wonderful show. No, and I got along with all of those people. Most of them wound up doing Love Boat. B never did, but Conrad Bain and Rue McClanahan and Esther and Adrienne did the show. I think Bill Macy did the show too. I can't remember, but yeah, I mean, it was a great way to start. I was very lucky as a young actor. I got to work with 2 of the real kind of comedy moguls at the time. One, of course, was Norman Lear, and the other was Grant Tinker, doing the Mary Tyler Moore Show and Phyllis and a couple of other things that he did. And of course, Mary Tyler Moore is where I met Gavin MacLeod.
That's what I was going to ask you. That's where you first connected.
Well, I wouldn't say it was a real connection. It was, hi, how are you? I've got 2 lines in this show. It's nice to see you. Don't be strange. Keep in touch. But yeah, no, and Ted Knight and Ed Asner and got along with everybody. Ed Asner and I had a little bit of a complicated relationship because he came out and campaigned against me when I ran for Congress.
I had Ed on the show.
Yeah.
I can imagine politically you guys would be on the opposite sides there. So
Yeah. We got along kind of the way the Israelis and the Palestinians do. I mean, kind of like that.
All right, so that's fine. Okay, well, but as actors, I'm sure you.
Oh, sure. No. And Betty White, of course, who did, I don't know, she must have done 5 or 10 Love Boats. She was on all the time.
That must have been fun.
It was.
Before I get to one big one before the Love Boat, Death Race 2000.
Oh, Death Race 2000 with David Carradine and Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting because I had a supporting role in that, and it was a low budget movie, as all of Roger Corman's movies were. I think we shot the entire movie at some location in Pasadena, and they just kept moving the furniture around some lobby to make it look different. It was a futuristic type thing, but they put all the non-stars, it was everybody but David Carradine at the time, in a little Winnebago trailer, and we just hang out there in the morning and drink coffee. And I remember, actually, I knew Stallone because Stallone and I had done a commercial in New York years ago for something called Rapid Shave Cologne Scent, which was the kind of thing that made you could shave and then you wouldn't have to put on deodorant because it would make you smell so good. Except eventually it became something they used in Vietnam called Agent Orange, but at the time they didn't know that. Anyway, so Stallone was in the trailer and we connected once again. I remember him sitting in the trailer one day saying, I'm thinking of writing this movie is about a fighter. Just what we need, another picture about a fighter, right? I said, well, I'm sure it'll be fine, Sly.
12 movies later.
Yeah. But anyway, as far as Death Race 2000 was concerned, I think we shot the thing in 2 weeks. Corman cut it in another week. He released it in the 4th week and made his money back in the 5th week.
Roger Corman, he knew what he was doing.
He knew absolutely what he was doing. It was kind of the Aaron Spelling of cheap B flicks.
And so many people got their start in Roger Corman movies.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's nothing to be ashamed of. There's no such thing as a bad job, I don't think. Of course, unless we're talking about pornography or something like that. But yeah, I mean, people who think they're too good to do things, to me, usually wind up not doing anything at all.
No, yeah. When I said that, I meant it. I mean, like James Cameron, I think, did Piranha before all his big movies with him. And
sure. No, well, look at the people that passed through our show and the people who had glorious careers. I mean, we had people like Vincent Price and Helen Hayes and Sir John Mills and Ethel Merman and Ray Bolger. I mean, so the fact that James Franciscus turned us down, I mean, we could live with that. That was all right.
You guys had a lot of guest stars.
We did indeed.
Wait, before the Love Boat, there was Monster Squad.
Oh, one of my faves. My favorite.
I found it on YouTube, by the way.
Oh, so yeah, no, it's still there. It's still there.
Oh, by that I mean I watched it, some of it. That's
how about that Pat Boone outfit, right? The bow tie.
That was it. That was a rocking yellow sweater, your bow tie.
White bucks, yeah. No. It was now that was a show. You want to talk about speed. That show was produced and directed by a guy named Billy D'Angelo, who had made his bones on Batman. He was one of the original guys on the Adam West and Burt Ward show. And we shot pretty much the way they shot Batman, which was just let everything hang out. I mean, if you as an actor, after one of the scenes would say, Billy, could I go again? I didn't really feel as though I was in the right move. His idea was, cut it, print it, ship it. We're doing cartoons here. So
this was a Saturday morning show, right?
Oh yeah, no, and well, it was a Saturday morning show, and NBC had the somewhat benighted idea that rather than have cartoons on Saturday morning, which children loved and still do, they'd have some live action shows. So ours was one of them, Monster Squad. It was, I thought it was kind of a cute premise. I liked it a great deal, and the actors were great. We had a wonderful time.
It looked like it was fun. Just so everyone knows, Fred played Walt, who worked at Fred's Wax Museum.
Yeah, that's right. Worked at Fred's Wax Museum.
And Walt, Fred Grandy.
And then there was this this guy named Michael Lane, who was this big, tall guy who had been in a Humphrey Bogart movie. And I don't know if he had been nominated for an Academy Award or something like that, or they'd come close to it. But anyway, he was a serious movie guy. Then there was a guy named Henry Pollack II, who was in all kinds of series and a very talented character actor. He was on, did you ever see that show that Mel Brooks did, a parody of Robin Hood called When Things Were Rotten? Bernie Coppell was on that show, and Dick Van Patten and Dick Gautier and Henry Pollack II. And he did, oh gosh, I don't know how many series he did. He was like the biggest deal in the show at the time. And then there was this wonderful little guy named Buck Cartelian, who had made most of his success in Planet of the Apes movies. So nobody ever saw his face. And of course, in this movie, he played the Wolfman, so nobody ever saw his face again.
That's amazing. And those are like some of my favorite movies, too.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was...
Henry Pollack was Dracula.
Yeah.
And then Michael Lane was Frankenstein.
And Bucky Cartelian was Bruce the Wolf.
Yes, Bruce W. Wolf.
Bruce W. Wolf. And we would fight a villain every week. Sometimes it was Julie Newmar. Sometimes it was Avery Schreiber. And it ran for 13 episodes. But that experiment never worked with NBC. The live thing on Saturday morning was not a keeper for them. So they, I think they canned both the slate of shows on Saturday morning and the network exec who thought it up. There was a purge after about 13 weeks.
I did like that you had a crime computer. It was right out of, you could tell it was in the vein of Batman because it was labeled.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, right.
It said crime computer on it.
Yeah. And we did the same thing with the fights. They would have the wow, pow, zowie stuff. So as I tell you, it was a Batman derivative.
That's fine. I did notice that there were some other things later, but called Monster Squad, but unrelated. There wasn't.
Yeah, there was a movie called Monster Squad, which was much more serious.
Right.
But we were the paternoster of Monster Squads, I think.
Yes. The last big sitcom you were on before heading into Love Boat fame was Welcome Back, Kotter.
Yes, with George Carlin.
George Carlin was on that episode?
George Carlin played a DJ and I played his assistant. That was an experience too, because he was a very good actor. Because he is so well known as a kind of defining presence in comedy. You can kind of chart those guys who were relevant comedians as opposed to just joke meisters, going back to Mart Saul and Lenny Bruce and George Carlin, he and Woody Allen. Those guys came out of the same era, but Carlin was a good actor too.
Oh, absolutely.
It's interesting. Jackie Gleason said something that always resonated with me. And to me, Gleason was the greatest comedian we've ever had. But somebody asked him in an interview years ago, what's the difference between a comedian and a comic? And he said, well, a comic says funny things and a comedian says things funny. And he said, it's interesting because most great comedians are great actors, but not all great actors are great comedians.
Very true.
And that was true of Carlin.
A lot of comedians are great, even dramatically, like Robin Williams, John Candy, Jim Carrey. All of them are amazing in the drama roles.
And Gleason was too. I mean, did you ever see, Gleason, The Hustler and Gigo, and the stuff he did with Burt Reynolds was a little sillier, but he was always great. And if you go back and watch those early Honeymooners, that still is coin of the realm as far as I'm concerned in terms of tight written comedy. And that was the source from all blessings flow, as far as I can tell. If there had been no Honeymooners, I'll bet you anything there would not have been an I Love Lucy. I'll put money on that.
All right. I'll back up that bet.
Okay. Right. Good. We're together now.
We're together.
Yeah.
So how did the Love Boat come to be? There was pilots before the series.
Well, if you want to go way back to the Jurassic period, in my view, it began with Love American Style. Remember that show?
Yes.
Okay. That little vignette comedy show that was on, and I did one of those. And the guy that produced that at Paramount was a guy named Douglas Kramer, who was a pretty successful executive producer at Paramount. And he, having done Love American Style, read a book by a woman named Geraldine Saunders, which was something on the love boats. And she'd been chronicling her experiences as a cruise director. So Kramer bought that book and decided he would try and create a Love American Style motif on a ship. And although he had some chops as a producer, the networks were not bowled over by this idea. I went up for the first pilot, was told I was all wrong. As a matter of fact, none of the original cast was in the first pilot. So they shot that thing and it sunk like the Titanic. And then apparently Kramer had enough clout at Paramount to get them to do another pilot. And this time they cast Ted and Bernie Coppell and me in the roles we eventually played, but they had a different captain and they had a different cruise director. But it was the same premise, different stories, romance. And we actually took a cruise on that. We were on the Pacific Princess, as I recall. And that one never went anywhere. So, most people say, well, and usually in TV, one strike and you're out. But somehow, and this is something that I don't think Kramer ever got credit for, he managed to go to Aaron Spelling and say, look, the network's not getting this, but there's a germ of an idea here that I think could be a hit. And Spelling, who of course had a sixth sense about these things, looked at it and said, okay, we'll do another pilot. Well, of course, ABC was the producer. And at that point, ABC was known as Aaron's broadcasting company. So they're not going to say no to this guy, right? But the feeling was that we're doing this as a favor for Aaron. This show is going to go right in the toilet. But because he's Aaron, we will give him one more bite of the apple. So they cast it again. This time they got Lauren Tweez, who was cast literally the night before the first day of shooting. And Aaron, to his credit, went out and got Gavin MacLeod, who had just come off the Mary Tyler Moore show. And I think Ted's talked to you about this. Gavin was told, don't do this show. It's going to suck. It's going to be terrible. But Gavin and Aaron both saw something in this that smelled like it was going to be a success. So he was not hard to convince to do this show. So third pilot, shot this one on the Queen Mary, didn't go anywhere, just, down in Long Beach shooting the thing. And they bought it. And of course, the critical reception to this thing was absolutely vile. I mean, everybody thought it was going to be a flop. They couldn't stop ridiculing it. And it was a hit from day one. It was a huge monster hit. And they put it in the graveyard position on Saturday night at 10 o'clock. And the first thing we did was knock the Carol Burnett show off the air.
Damn you.
Yeah. And then they put Kojak against us and we kicked his ass. And so, all of a sudden they finally came around and said, oh my God, this is absolute gold. And we were not, I don't think we were even through our first 13 episodes. This is back in the day, Jeff, when you did 25 episodes
right,
routinely, and your first 13 were the ones that decided whether you'd go on. Well, I think they picked up our show after the first 4 or something like that.
Wow.
And then from that, it just became a volcano of success. Within a couple of years, we were traveling up to Alaska and then all over the world. And at that point, it wasn't just a show, it was a third world power because they sold it all over the world. In Greece, it was known as Topliotis Agapis. In France, it was Les Cosiers s'amusent. In Mexico, Barca de Amor, something like that. The only 2 places I know where it really tanked were Great Britain, England, and Japan. Japan, it was called Roboboto, and it was a flop. And the Germans liked it so much, they even tried to copy it. And it's copy, which is a nice word for plagiarism. They developed some show called Traumschiff, which means dream ship. And it wasn't the same.
That's so
didn't
funny.
make it. Yeah.
So you're international. So you can't go anywhere in the world without being recognized.
Well, I can now. I mean, there's a little water under the bridge at this point. So,
well, it's
not as though I'm
during the
stopped in my
80s, the
driveway.
90s. Like...
No, at that point, no. I mean, there was a situation, we were shooting in Turkey, and we were at an ancient Roman ruin called Ephesus. And near there's a little Turkish village called Kushadasi. And so on a break, we went down to Kushadasi because they were known for selling leather goods. And so we decided we'd look in their shops and see if we could find some leather goods. So I'm kind of half in and half out of my costume. I didn't want to get completely undressed because I was going to have to get back into it. So I think I had my shirt with the epaulettes on and I was wearing long pants or something. So I walk into this little shop in this little town. And the proprietor of the shop takes a look at me and he runs out into the street. And I hear, Mr. Gopher is here. Next thing I know, there are thousands of people whose faces are pressed against the window. And that's the way it was. I mean, there were places, Greece and Turkey in particular, where we had to be cordoned off like the Beatles. Remember? When those guys would tour?
Yeah.
Well, that was true with us in certain places too.
That is incredible, but probably scary also.
Well, it was a little scary, but nobody goes into this business to become anonymous. Okay, so it was more thrilling than it was scary.
But there's like a degree, and you're like,
oh yeah, no, and the nice thing I think about Love Boat is because all of us actors, Gavin included, and I think if he were around, he would admit this too. We were all journeymen. I mean, Bernie had been bouncing around for a long time, done all kinds of great stuff, but had not really caught on. And Ted had a couple of successful shows, but they hadn't lasted very long. Lauren was brand new. I was bobbing from one audition to another. Nobody knew who I was. And so when this thing caught on, we were very much aware of our role, which was a cast of supporting players, and the real star was the ship. And then, of course, the guest stars who were always billed first. And it was only over time that we began to develop our own personas and personalities and fan bases. And because we weren't catapulted into success, like, for example, an Eric Estrada on Chips or Henry Winkler or guys like that, I think we were able to catch up to our celebrity, or if you prefer, stardom, without it taking its toll on us. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah.
You got to work. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that, because none of us got heads that were so big that we wound up shooting ourselves in the foot.
That's good.
Yeah. No, it's very good.
So let me ask you a question, because I was just, say, 10 or 11-year-old Jeff watching The Love Boat. So
okay,
I wouldn't have caught on to this, but I was rewatching the videos, and there's a lot of videos with, there's a whole 3-minute video I found of just you kissing people on the Love Boat.
Yeah, I did not compile that video.
No, I'm sure you didn't compile it. I kind of remembered Bernie being like a ladies' man as the doc.
No, he was. And Bernie made a big deal out of it. I mean, Bernie, who had, he'd been playing guys like Siegfried and guys with funny accents, all of a sudden he's a leading man. And so he was very taken with that concept.
But you had your leading man. You got to kiss Marsha Brady, and you had
Maureen McCormick.
McCormick, and you had Lauren Tweeds. There was an episode where you were with.
Oh yeah, that was a famous episode. Julie and Gopher. That's still considered to be one of the jewels in the archive. We didn't think about it at the time, but it turned out to be a favorite episode for a lot of people. But yeah, there were a lot of. It seemed to me the first 2 seasons, if I had a romance or any kind of intimate relationship, it was either with Barbie Benton or a chimp. And then after that, I wrote an episode about a woman who is coming on board because she's just gone through a kind of painful separation. She and Gopher kind of catch on. She's older than he is. It's a May-December thing. That was Jill St. John. So that was not a problem.
No, you know, when I was watching a clip with Bernie, and he was, like you said, loving the fact that he got to be a ladies' man. When I talked to Ted shared some stories of the people he got to kiss.
Sure.
It just seems like you guys must have really enjoyed being on the Love Boat.
Well, what's not to enjoy? Now I was considered to be somewhat inept and not obviously kind of the sloppy second to Bernie. But, over 8 years, you get your licks in. And come on, the show was a romance. So
absolutely. Did you get to kiss Eve Plum or just have a flirt with her?
You remember I wrote a show that Billy Crystal did called The Kissing Bandit. And
Mike and Ike.
Mike and Ike was a show I did for Ted, but The Kissing Bandit was a guest star show with Billy Crystal, and there was a woman who was on 8 is Enough named Lori Walters. I don't know if you remember her or not. She's a good actress. I met her. We actually went out for a while. Eve, I'm not sure I remember Eve.
I remember there was a scene where you were flirting with Eve Plum. I remember because it was
flirting. Come on.
Well, no, because I was just remembering because I was just trying to figure out how many people from the Brady Bunch you were with.
I did a play with Christopher Knight. Does that count?
But the scene is, and then Gavin, as Captain Steubing, comes up to you and says, Gopher, our job is to board all the passengers, not just the pretty ones.
Well, he was wrong about that. I never accepted that. If it's a choice between, Soupy Sales and Jill St. John, I know who I'm going for.
So how is working with, because that episode that you had Billy Crystal, wasn't, at least on that episode, I think Todd Bridges, Robert Reed, Nancy Culp.
Oh, Nancy Culp, yeah. And Pat Carroll. Oh, God, Pat Carroll.
Wow.
I saw Pat Carroll play Falstaff in Washington. It's one of the best Falstaffs I've ever seen. Pat Carroll, if you please.
If you please.
Yeah. Nancy Culp ran for Congress. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah, Nancy Cupp, big liberal, evidently. We never talked politics. When we were on the show, we did the show. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about Reagan or the war in Vietnam or anything like that. But yes, eventually Nancy Culp went back to Pennsylvania to run for Congress. And she was very liberal, and she was running in a relatively conservative district. And her co-star, Buddy Ebsen, went out to Pennsylvania and campaigned against her, and apparently did a TV ad that said, "Nancy, I love you, but you're just too liberal."
Oh, my God. You think being on the Beverly Hillbillies together, that would have formed a bond?
Well, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but it didn't extend to political views. So
it's
whatever.
fun. It's funny hearing you tell the stories because when I talked to Ed Asner, he was telling stories about Charlton Heston, him, the two of them.
Sure.
It's interesting to hear the stories like that you just shared and Ed going against you and stuff like that, only in the sense that it kind of puts today in perspective in the sense that things don't really change. Like, I feel like a lot of people are just becoming political. I don't want to go too deep into politics, but my point is there's always been like this. Yeah.
Well, there has been, but it's much angrier now. I mean, I've got friends that I served with in Congress and friends that are still there, and they would tell you it's a much more vicious climate. We used to tear one another apart on the floor of Congress when I was a member of the House, and then we go out and have a drink together. That doesn't happen anymore, from what I can tell, and that's too bad.
That is too bad, yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that I think actors kind of understand the limits of extremism better than politicians do. I mean, I never held it against Ed Asner. He's a liberal. I was a conservative, and he came out the guy from MASH. What's his name? Married to Shelley Fabares. Mike Farrell. He was the same guy. Came out, campaigned against me. Didn't beat me. I mean, I'm at the end of the day, I was still standing. But that's what they do. That's okay.
I don't like that anyone went after you. They should have just said, leave Gopher alone. Leave Fred alone.
They didn't.
He's done so much for us as Gopher. Even though politically we're probably on a different sides. But
probably.
Still.
But actually, that's an interesting point because I think very often a lot of people who are not politically engaged or connected don't like to see their celebrities whom they warm to trashed in any way, shape, or form, even if it's a political rally. And so I can't be sure of this, but I'm not so sure Ed Asner didn't get me as many votes as he lost. People back home say, well, he's going to talk that way about Gopher. I'm just going to go vote for him. That's what I'm going to do.
That's right. That's what I was saying.
It's funny. I don't know, from Michigan, do you remember a congressman named Guy Vanderjack?
No.
Okay. Well, Guy Vanderjack represented Muskegon, the Dutch, Holland, Grand Rapids area. And I had a very Dutch couple of counties in my district, and he was very popular. So I was clamoring to get Guy Vanderjack to come out and campaign for me when I first ran for office, and he eventually did. And he came out, and he had a beautiful bass voice. I mean, the guy could have made a fortune in voiceovers, but he was many years in Congress. But he came out and campaigned for me, and the people loved him. And when it was over, a guy came up to me and he said, that Vanderdeck, he's a good talker. And I said, yeah, he sure is. He says, yeah, boy, I'll tell you, if he's for you, I'm for you too. And I said, well, that's great. He said, one thing though, what part on the Love Boat did he play? I mean, that's their orientation, right? That's not, well, is he a Republican? How do you vote on, subsidies for agriculture? No, that's not what they're interested in. What part on the Love Boat did he play?
That is really funny. You served in 4 Congresses, right? The 100, 101, 102, 103.
Yeah. From 80, I was
87.
87 to 95.
And then you started in the 5th Congressional District in Iowa, and then that was
it was the 6th.
And then
it was the 6th, and it became the 5th because we kept losing people.
That's what I was going to ask you. I had 5th and 6th written down. I said you were both. I was going to ask you what happened there. Okay. I couldn't tell if it got bigger or smaller.
It's down to 4 districts now.
Oh, wow. And then just for a hoot, Fred, I looked up legislation that you sponsored.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, great.
Now, keep in mind, I only chose these based on ones that I kind of understood what they said.
Okay.
Vegetable Oil Use Promotion Act.
Yes. Yeah, big. I was on the Agriculture Committee for 4 years, so that was a big deal for me.
And then you awarded the Congressional Gold Medal to Rabbi Mordechai Mendel Schneerson. That became a law. That one became a law.
Oh, Rabbi Schneerson is famous. Yes. Rabbi in Brooklyn. Yeah.
So I thought that was cool. And then you've to suspend temporarily the duty on zinc powder.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have no idea why I did that, but I'm sure it was important at the time.
But I looked it up and zinc powder went through the roof after that. No, I just got
Yeah. Well, that's what my boys on Wall Street told me at any rate.
And then in 1992, you made it illegal to dismantle a Rubik's Cube and put it back together and say you did it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
That one I made up. But
I believe it. I mean, I just sponsored them, Jeff. I didn't read them. My God.
That's so funny. So that's really cool. So when you left I think if I got the numbers right, and you can correct me, but sometimes these sites are wrong. You did 246 episodes of The Love Boat, right?
Oh, good. I'm glad you brought that up because I've always been wondering how many I totally did.
Okay, so I got you.
I did not know that. 246. Okay.
I got you down for 246, but there was only 250 total.
No, that can't be right then.
That can't be right. I got the numbers wrong. I must have the numbers wrong. Because you didn't leave right at the end, did you? That's what I was gonna.
No. I left after my 8th year, and I think they did another season or two because they did one full season, which I don't know if it was still 20 shows or not. But then they had their final season. They did just a few 2-hour movies.
Well, then maybe because if I go to IMDb, it says like Gavin, Ted, who I know and Bernie, who I know are on all of them. It says 250 episodes.
Well, then I probably did closer to 225.
Okay. You are credited for 246. So, all right, we'll just say IMDb. I don't know. All right, that's all right. So that answers that question. So you didn't leave right at the end.
Well, let's not dwell on this because I still get paid the residual. So if they think it's 246 and I don't start getting my checks from Zimbabwe, I'm going to hold you responsible.
I do not want to be responsible for that.
Okay. All right.
All right. Ethel Merman was your mom on the show. So I'll assume
loved her.
She's one of your favorite guest stars then.
Yeah. Wonderful woman. And of course, an absolute icon in the business. Very down to earth. Had a mouth like a longshoreman. Is it always a hoot when like you get like a parent, like where like you get this celebrity parent? Because then you guys are connected. Oh yeah, no. Yeah. And you know who my father was? Did you figure that out?
No.
Bob Cummings. Remember Bob Cummings? Love that Bob. That might be a little before your time. He was a big TV star in the 50s, playing a photographer, kind of a Lothario photographer. And his secretary was Ann B. Davis from
The Brady Bunch.
Yeah. And he played my father. Now, a lot of these folks, and this, I'm trying to be as gentle as I can about this, they were a little past their prime when they did our show. Some of them practically on life support. So he was not quite the effervescent guy he was when he was a star in 1957. But he played my father.
I always thought it was cool though, like the whole balance between the old stars and the new stars. I always thought that was
Aaron's. That was Aaron's, I think, brainchild. His idea was we are going to reignite the interest, if not the careers, in people like Greer Garson and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. and Olivia de Havilland. You know, people who had really made their bones in the glory days of MGM and studio system, but were now marginally involved with television. And of course, one of the nice things about the show is actors were treated wonderfully, particularly if they got a cruise. I mean, it was the greatest perk in Hollywood for 10 years.
Oh, amazing. And plus there's something about old school actors. They probably come on stage and they just hit it. They just...
Oh yeah. Well, no. And that's something that Ted and I appreciated very early on, is that here are all of these guys that if you were in acting school, all you do is be able to look at old tapes of them, or perhaps read something that they'd read or see an interview that they did. All of them were on the show. We would take guys like Ray Bolger and Jack Gilford to lunch and just pick their brains. Ted and I, this would be a couple of years ago now, did this play, I'm Not Rappaport. And we're playing two old guys in New York. I'm an old kind of Jewish communist guy. And he's an old guy I believe he's a doorman at a hotel or runs a... and I realized when I was doing that show that I was basing my character on all of these brilliant Borscht Belt comedians that I'd worked with. Sid Caesar and Red Buttons and Shecky Green and Phil Foster and all of these guys who came through the show. And you just assimilate that if you're paying attention. You know how much that would cost if you tried to turn that into an acting school?
It's amazing.
You know?
It's also really nice that you recognized in the moment that it was happening and took advantage of it. Because a lot of times people would just look back and go, oh, why didn't I?
No, that's a very good point. But I think, again, because we were supporting players, our heads were not swollen with how important we were. We realized this is a tremendous opportunity. Bernie and I wrote a show for TED that featured Scatman Crothers. And what an education that guy was. I mean, you just remember these things and you say, how lucky could you be to be around all of these people? Vincent Price. I mean, can you imagine the stories Vincent Price could tell?
Amazing.
He told me a story about, he knew I was from Iowa. And so he told me a story when he was a younger actor. He was doing a tour of the George Bernard Shaw play, Don Juan in Hell. And it was him, Sir Cedric Hardwicke, Charles Boyer, and Agnes Moorehead. And he says, and we're playing the show in Des Moines. And this is like 1942, 1943. And he said, so after the show, we go out and have dinner, and Hardwicke orders fish in Des Moines in 1943. And the fish comes, and Hardwicke takes a bite and goes, long time no see. How great is that? You know?
That is so funny. So funny. So, since you mentioned I'm Not Rappaport with Ted.
Yeah.
It's probably a good segue into your theatrical life.
Now we're going to get to promote my show, I hope.
Yeah, let's promote your show. So
let's do that. All right.
Let's build up to it because there's two other things.
Okay, sure.
Theater-wise, so you got with Ted. That was one of the interesting things I learned about Ted, actually, like all the plays he's written, some amazing stuff.
Oh, yeah. This guy writes plays the way police officers write citations. I mean, he just knocks them out one rap. I don't think I've read as many plays as he's written.
Fascinating subjects.
Yeah.
You were in How to Succeed in Business Without Trying with Don Amici.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. That was a wonderful experience. Don Amici was one of the only guys who never did the Love Boat that I really considered to be a mentor. And this was before, he came back. This was before Trading Places and Cocoon, when his career had been reignited after he was essentially ostracized from Hollywood in the late 40s.
Oh, he was? I did not know that.
Oh, no. Apparently there was some scandal involving, I think, the wife or the paramour of a studio executive. And so he fled to New York and was on Broadway for a while and then kind of disappeared for a long time and then came back.
Oh, wow.
But this is how the business treats you. We were doing How to Succeed in Business, and this would have been 1982, 1983, something like that. And I was billed above him. That's wrong, but I lived with it.
That's that Monster Squad cred. Right
Yeah,
there.
it had to be Monster Squad, yeah.
And then with your daughter, Mariah,
yes.
on Golden Pond.
Yeah, that was a place called the Red House Theater, which we opened. We opened that theater, and my daughter is a very successful singer and actress in New York. And right now, put in a little plug for her, she is in the process of developing. She's acting and dancing in a Broadway show that's in workshop stage right now, based on The Devil Wears Prada. And they're going to open it up in Chicago this summer and then supposedly move to Broadway.
Oh, that'd be good. That's a great movie. Great material.
But she's done all kinds of shows and she has a sensational voice. But yeah, we were able to work together. And that's, one of the things I've got two kids in the business, Mariah and my son, Charlie, he's really the reason I was on the Mindy Project, because he was a writer and executive producer with Mindy. And he calls me up and he says, Dad, I've got good news and bad news. I said, what? He said, well, there's a role that's perfect for you on the Mindy Project. I said, great. He said, here's the bad news. You got to audition. So I got out my iPhone and I did the thing, and I was on that show for 3 years. He's now he's got a huge deal with Warner Brothers and HBO Max, and this is interesting. He is developing, you can't call it a reboot. It's kind of a new version of Scooby-Doo. It's going to be, and if there's such a thing as an adult version of Scooby-Doo, this is going to be it. It features the character Vera, who Mindy will play, and it's an animated show. And he's been working on it for years, and so it's
that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. So he's in the business. Now, I've got one child who has some common sense, and she very wisely became a software engineer, and will probably be paying for all of us when we're in the motion picture home.
Yes, that is also a good profession. A good profession.
Yeah, it is.
All right, so that's awesome. That's awesome. It's good that you know people in the business. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
And So let's talk about your one-man play. You're going to be in my backyard in Dexter, Michigan, just
at the Encore Musical Theater. I will be there we actually open on the 8th of December and run through the 12th. And it is a one-man play called Give 'Em Hell, Harry, based on the life of Harry Truman. And it's not a new show. James Whitmore was doing this show almost 50 years ago, and he used to tour in it. But I kind of discovered it during the pandemic. And I looked at this thing, and based on my political career and my show business career, I read this thing. I said, my God, this guy is talking about working with Joseph Stalin and Dwight Eisenhower and the civil rights movement in 1948. And it is as current now as it was then. And, the whole thing about Harry Truman is here is a politician that everybody trusted. I mean, what a concept, right?
What a concept.
So that's what the show is. It's mostly Truman's own words, been recrafted by a very gifted writer named Samuel Galou. And it is a one-man show with me playing Truman all through his early career in World War I and running for the presidency and succeeding Roosevelt, and of course, dropping the bomb. That was his decision entirely. Creating the state of Israel, integrating the United States military, and creating institutions like NATO and the United Nations. I mean, other than that, the guy didn't do anything. But I mean, it is worth remembering this guy, if for no other reason, to kind of restore our faith in what politicians can be, if they would just be as honest as he was.
That is good. Yeah. It's funny you say, because you said current now as it is then, which is what I was kind of saying earlier, which when we were talking about the little squabbles. All right, how about, I did a little research on the play, like you mentioned. It's not it's not new. There was a movie where I think the person was nominated for an Academy Award.
Yeah, they actually filmed a stage version of this. I think either the late 90s, early 2000s, and Whitmore was Truman. The actor Kevin McCarthy, I don't know if you remember him or not, pretty prominent actor in the 50s and 60s and 70s. He took it on tour for a while. And to my knowledge, Harry Truman's grandson, Clifton Truman Daniel, has done it from time to time. But this is a version that we kind of contracted because, a lot of theaters now, Jeff, are saying, or at least they did during the height of the pandemic, they said, look, we want to do the show, but you can't have an intermission because it's too dangerous for people to come out into the lobby and mingle and then go back into the theater. Okay. So we did this at the Aspen Theater in Aspen, Colorado this summer. And the guy who ran the place, Jed Bernstein, said, can you make this a one act? And we said, sure. And we did. And so we keep it at that. So it's about 90 minutes. It's very funny, but it's very moving to see how a politician, and this guy was nothing. I mean, he was the son of a mule trader. People laughed at him. I mean, he had as much credibility in his career when he assumed the presidency as Love Boat did in the late 70s when it went on the air. Everybody thought it's over for him. And of course, he became one of the greatest figures of the 20th century. So it is a great motivating story. After we do Michigan, we go to Syracuse probably, and then to the Utah Shakespeare Festival. So
so this is a play that you rediscovered yourself, and then you wanted to bring this.
I went to my producing partners, one of whom is Ted, a couple of other guys, some Broadway guys. And I said, look, first of all, it's a one-man show. It's going to be an easy production assignment for theaters because they don't have to worry about pandemic protocols. Actors don't have to wear masks. You don't have to worry about backstage because you're on stage for the whole show. So it is kind of pandemic friendly, if you want to put it that way. And so we pitched it, and Aspen bought it, and then the Encore Theater bought it. But it's a delight to do. It just, as somebody who came out of politics and has worked with a lot of people who I think now are something of an endangered species, people who you admired because they actually did what they said they were going to do. I mean, Truman, at the end of the play that I'm in, turns to a bunch of reporters and he says, boys, always do right. It'll gratify some and astonish the rest.
Just common sense then, now.
Yeah. But common sense is not very common in politics these days. And so it's kind of it's a cause celeb for me, I guess, to do this show.
That's awesome. Here, I'll feed you one line and then you can say it as Harry S. Truman.
All right.
No, sir, I don't give them hell. I just tell the truth and they think it's hell.
No, sir, I'm not giving them hell. I just tell the truth and they think it's hell. Woo. And then he goes on to say, now, folks, I'm just running for office because I need a place to live. There's a housing shortage in this country, and I do not want to be a burden on the community.
It's all like real, like just subtle, like humor. Like
Oh,
that.
no,
It's
it's great. It's
awesome.
wonderful, wonderful jokes in this thing. Very easy even to sit through. So, if you're in the neighborhood, I'll set you up. They know me there. So
Awesome. This was so fun. Thank you. I can't thank you enough for hanging out with me.
Hey, is it over? I mean, this went fast.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, we know what you're doing next, so we can skip that.
Okay, great.
Are you on social media or anything? Do you hang out there?
Just Facebook. I just do the old guy social medias. I'm not Instagrammer. Now, eventually, we'll probably develop a website for Give 'Em Hell Harry, and we'll probably put that on Facebook and Instagram, and we'll do all that stuff to promote the show. But I'm a little Twitter shy, to tell you the truth, because it seems to me that's just a license to pull out the long knives too often.
I agree. Everything we talked about earlier, about the evilness and the hatred, just exasperated. It's all because of Twitter.
And social
and
media.
I love Twitter. Don't get me wrong. I love Twitter, but
Well, okay, but social media gives you the anonymity. It gives you the cloak of anonymity. So you can say all these terrible things and people won't even know who you are.
Right.
And to me, that's cowardly. If you're going to insult me, come up to me after the show and say, you sucked.
Right. It's not like the old days where Ed Asner would say, do not vote for Fred.
Yeah, do not vote for this guy. No, in this case, I support Ed Asner.
Oh, wow. Oh, Fred, thank you so much. This was so fun.
You bet. You had a great time.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
All right. How amazing was that? Makes you want to search up the Love Boat, take a few cruises. If you do that, I wouldn't blame you. Fred Grandy was awesome. If you love that conversation and you're feeling like you need to head back to the Love Boat, again, check out the interview also with Ted Lange. If you're in Michigan or any of the future stops on Fred's Give 'Em Hell Harry tour, be sure to check that out. If you meet Fred, tell him you heard him on Live from Detroit, The Jeff Dwoskin Show. Well, we're nearing the end of another episode, and you know what that means. That means it's time for another trending hashtag from the family of hashtags at Hashtag Roundup. Follow Hashtag Roundup on Twitter at Hashtag Roundup. Download the free, always free, no cost to you app from the Google or Apple Play stores. Get notified every time a hashtag game starts. Play along, and one day one of your tweets may show up on a future episode of Live from Detroit, The Jeff Dwoskin Show. Fame and fortune await you. This week's hashtag, Unlikely Love Boat Storylines, from the weekly Unlikely game on Hashtag Roundup. That's right, Hashtag Unlikely Love Boat Storylines, where the internet got together to serve up some storylines we are likely not to actually see on the Love Boats. Here are a few of my favorite Hashtag Unlikely Love Boat storylines. The Love Boat is actually a transformer. They changed the name of the Love Boat to Meta. The Guinness World Records recognizes Ted as the first and best ever finger guns. Ted totally deserves that. That might be more likely, but we're going to continue with Hashtag Unlikely Love Boat storylines. They all find Nemo. That would be great, actually. Ken Burns goes on a 2-week cruise to make an 18-week movie about it. That would be amazing new season of The Love Boat, but yet unlikely at the same time. Gopher puts on long pants and becomes a U.S. congressman. Wait a minute. That actually did happen. Jaws makes an appearance. Ooh, that would be an interesting crossover to help boost ratings. The gang is hijacked by cat pirates. Cat pirates on the sea is nothing to laugh about, but yet that would be a Hashtag Unlikely Love Boat storyline. Don and Melania take a long overdue vacation together. This is the Love Boat, Dan. They're supposed to find love. Well, maybe they do, finally. Gopher ruins everyone's golf game. Wait a minute. I think that's a different Gopher in a completely different movie. Julie Ann Gopher wants to get married, but the captain refuses to perform the ceremony. Oh, come on, Captain Dubing. Let this love happen. Doc discovers he is Isaac's father. That would be an unlikely Love Boat storyline. Everyone gets divorced and the boat sinks. Tom Poston and Charo stop an assassination attempt on Peggy Fleming. That would need to be like a 2-hour movie. A crossover with Gilligan's Island. 2 people decide that 7 days isn't long enough to know someone before getting married. It's the Love Boat. That is unlikely. It was a 3-hour tour. Captain Steubing gets seasick. The doctor likes to give horse dewormer to anyone who gets sick. Lamb Chop demands a cabin upgrade only to end up on the captain's table menu. The Pacific Princess cannot go under 50 knots or everyone dies. These are all amazing hashtag unlikely love boat storylines. But we have one more. Leonardo DiCaprio goes around the ship measuring all the doors. You go, Leo. About time we proved you could have fit on that door. Oh. All right, those are all amazing hashtag unlikely love boat storylines, all retweeted at Jeff Dwoskin Show on Twitter. Go show them some love. Well, with the hashtag reading over, they only can mean one thing. That's right. It's the end of another episode. Episode 81 has come and gone. I do want to thank my amazing guest, Fred Grandy, for joining me. And of course, I want to thank all of you for coming back week after week. It means the world to me, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Jeff Dwoskin Show with your host, Jeff Dwoskin. Now go repeat everything you heard and sound like a genius. Catch us online at thejeffdwoskinshow.com or follow us on Twitter at Jeff Dwoskin Show, and we'll see you next time.